Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. After days of build-up, the Rafah attack has begun. Israel is raining fire on the Gazan city as America halts military shipments. Netanyahu shoots a defiant message to Joe Biden. He says Israelis will fight with their fingernails. But beyond the rhetoric, how is Israel placed and how much damage can the American move cause them? We'll discuss all of that. In the South China Sea, another escalation. Beijing claims it has struck a secret deal with Manila. It has leaked audio recordings as proof. We'll tell you what this is all about. Also, why the West has declared war on Chinese electric vehicles. From Europe to America, they're all talking tariffs to bar Chinese cars. In India, companies are adopting artificial intelligence faster than the rest of the world. We'll bring you the findings of a new report. In Bangladesh, a visit by India's top diplomat amid reports that China is eyeing a major project on the Teesta River. In Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, a brutal crackdown on a peaceful protest. 2 schoolgirls said to be killed. You may not see these reports in the Western press or concerns over human rights of Kashmiris here. In Nepal, the government is prioritizing mental health of pregnant women and young mothers. We'll tell you how. Elon Musk's brain chip is reporting a technical glitch. What does that mean? Netflix is betting big on Africa, but it faces serious competition. And why Japanese bread is making news. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. In India, the Supreme Court grants interim bail to Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal. He had sought relief to campaign for the ongoing general election. The court asks the Chief Minister to surrender on the 2nd of June, a day after the final phase of polling for the Lok Sabha. China's new ambassador to India takes charge, says ready to work with New Delhi to find solutions to outstanding issues. The post was vacant for 18 months. Relations between the two countries have been frozen, except for trade, since the Ladakh border standoff in May 2020. Taiwan's Air Force holds live fire training exercises. Fighter jets, missiles and laser-guided bombs were deployed during this exercise. This comes just days before the inauguration of a new president, seen by China as a quote-unquote dangerous separatist. Beijing claims Taiwan as part of its territory. The United Kingdom exits recession after its economy reported better than expected growth in the first quarter. This is much needed good news for embattled Prime Minister Rishi Sunak before this year's general election. And heat stroke has already claimed more than 60 lives in Thailand this year. That's more than the total number of deaths from it throughout 2023. A delayed monsoon season and the El Niño phenomenon are being blamed for the high temperatures. The countdown is over. The attack on Rafah has begun. It's the most consequential stage of this war. Thousands of civilian lives are at stake. So is a long-standing alliance, that of Israel and the US. A last-minute ceasefire talk was underway in Cairo, but on Thursday, it broke down. As soon as it did, Israel stepped up the offensive. Their target is eastern Rafah. Fighter jets and attack drones targeted buildings there. Footage showed smoke rising from the city. Tanks have also moved into place. They're stationed at a road that runs through central Rafah. So the plan is quite clear. First, cut off the eastern part of the city, then bomb it non-stop. And what about the civilians? The United Nations says around 100,000 of them have fled, and those who remain are at risk. Because Rafah's public infrastructure has crumbled. The hospitals are near breaking point, food is running out, clean water is not available, and power will run out soon. Just look at the aftermath of one Israeli strike.
The civil defense members came and gathered them in pieces. My friend died, they also picked him up in pieces. Everything is in pieces. We were behind the attacked house, glass came on us, good thing it was on our legs.
It's a multi-pronged operation. You have tanks firing from the ground, jets and drones firing from the sky, and soldiers fighting on the streets. There is simply no let-up. Take a look. So the battle is truly on. And what about diplomacy? The US is trying to pull Israel back. President Joe Biden said he will halt some military sales to Israel, mainly bombs and rockets. It's a very consequential move. The US is Israel's most important ally. Around 68% of their weapons imports come from the United States. So for Biden to halt some of it is huge. But Netanyahu is defiant. He says Israelis will fight with their fingernails if needed.
We are determined and we are united in order to defeat our enemies and those who want to destroy us. If we need to stand alone, we will stand alone. I have said that if necessary, we will fight with our fingernails. But we have much more than fingernails, and with that same strength of spirit, with God's help, together we will win.
It's a great soundbite, but let's be real here. You cannot beat Hamas with fingernails. You need real weapons. Does Israel have enough of those weapons? Their military says yes, they do. A spokesperson was asked about Biden's decision. He said Israel has enough arms for the Rafah operation. But that's expected. No military will downplay its ability. But the real picture could be more complicated. Just look at Israel's war strategy. Right from day one, it's been the same. Use bombs to cripple cities in Gaza, destroy buildings and public infrastructure, then finally deploy soldiers. But for that, you need a lot of munitions. You need precision-guided bombs, you need bunker busters, and you need rockets. All of these are part of the shipment halted by Biden. So Israel has two choices here. A, use up their stockpile and continue with the same strategy, or B, try something different. Maybe deploy soldiers instead of carpet bombing. But both strategies have risks. If Israel's stockpile runs low, its enemies may get ideas, the likes of Hezbollah or the Houthis. And if it deploys soldiers, more casualties and deaths. So Netanyahu has to be careful here. His allies have drawn very clear red lines for him. If he crosses those lines, it could be trouble. Which is why Netanyahu is pursuing a dual track. On one side, the war continues. He says Israel will fight with fingernails. On the other side, he talks about concessions. The IDF is posting videos from the Kerem Shalom crossing. It shows aid trucks entering Gaza. So Israel says, look, the checkpoint is open. The Prime Minister also gave an interview. He talked about varying differences with Joe Biden.
I've known Joe Biden for many years, so 40 years and more. We often had our agreements, but we've had our disagreements. We've been able to overcome them. I hope we can overcome them now, but we will do what we have to do to protect our country, and that means protect our future.
So what is Netanyahu's plan? Is he testing Biden's resolve? If so, it makes sense. The US has only halted one military shipment. Aid worth billions of dollars is still lined up for Israel. If Biden leverages that, Netanyahu may take him more seriously, because right now nothing has changed really. The bombings and the deaths continue. Now let's talk about the South China Sea. A major row has erupted, one that could further raise tensions in the volatile region. Among the many disputes in the South China Sea is the one between the Philippines and China. And now China has made a significant claim. It says it has struck a secret deal with the Philippines, a secret deal that dilutes Manila's claims in this disputed region. That's what the Chinese diplomats say. And do they have proof of this deal? They're citing a phone call. China says this phone call happened in January. Listen to this.
At the beginning of this year, China repeatedly negotiated with the Philippines' Western Command through diplomatic channels to reach a new model for Second Thomas Shoal transportation and subsidy.
They're talking about a new model in the Second Thomas Shoal. This is part of the Spratly Islands, the disputed region. Both China and the Philippines say it belongs to them. In recent months, China has stepped up its presence here. It has been using force to assert its claims. It has been sending Coast Guard boats. They've been deployed around a shipwreck, the BRP Sierra Madre. It's a rusting ship that Manila refuses to remove. This ship has been here since 1999. It has become a symbol of Manila's claims. In fact, the Philippines has stationed troops to guard it. They often send supplies to these troops through ships. And China tries to block these shipments by firing water cannons at them or colliding with Philippine vessels. These are all dangerous moves, of course. They raise the risk of conflict. Now, the same China says they have a secret deal, a gentleman's agreement. That's the term they've used. A deal with the Philippines. They're talking about a new model to manage the dispute. And what is this model? Beijing claims that Manila has agreed to send fewer vessels to the second Thomas Shoal, and whenever they plan a resupply mission, whenever the Philippines plans a mission, they will notify China in advance. In other words, Manila will check with Beijing every time it pays a visit to its own territory. These are the terms of the so-called secret deal. Only China says such a deal was made. And now China says Manila is breaking it. What does Manila say? It has dismissed China's claims. It says no such deal was ever made. And that's not all. The Philippines is now threatening to expel Chinese diplomats over these claims. Eduardo Ano has spoken. He's the National Security Advisor of the Philippines. His target is the Chinese mission in Manila. Listen to what he said. The Chinese embassy in Manila, and I'm quoting, has orchestrated repeated acts of engaging and dissemination of disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. Those actions should not be allowed to pass unsanctioned without serious penalty. And that penalty could be the expulsion of Chinese diplomats. Listen to Beijing's response.
The relevant statement of the Philippine side precisely proves that they have become weak in the face of facts and evidence, and that they have reached the point of exasperation and have no bottom line at all. China solemnly requests the Philippine side to effectively safeguard the normal performance of duties by Chinese diplomatic personnel, stop infringing and provoking, and refrain from denying the facts or acting harshly or lifting a stone to smash their own feet.
What is this evidence that China is talking about? An audio recording of the phone conversation where the secret deal is said to have been struck. It features this man, Vice Admiral Alberto Carlos. He heads the Western Command of the Philippine military. He's the man in charge for the second Thomas Shoal. Now, China says this Vice Admiral agreed to the new model while speaking to a Chinese diplomat. So first, China released a transcript of the call, the secret deal. Then they released the audio recording. The Chinese embassy in Manila called some journalists and played the audio recording for them. So according to China, this audio clip is a smoking gun, the definitive proof of a secret deal. Has anyone been able to authenticate it independently? Not that we know of. Plus, China's story is riddled with holes. For starters, can a naval officer strike deals on behalf of the entire country? Manila says they cannot. The Philippine Defense Secretary has spoken about this. His name is Gilberto Teodoro Jr. And he says only the president can seal an international agreement. There is another problem with China's claims. Reports say Beijing has redacted some of the statements. They've removed parts from the transcript that was released earlier this week. So we don't have a full version of the events to begin with. China is putting out selective facts. Clearly, there is more to this story, and Beijing is trying to mislead the international community. China's allegations are just like their claims on the South China Sea, baseless and hollow. Not just the South China Sea, there is a new flashpoint between Beijing and the West. Electric vehicles, specifically Chinese EVs. There are three things you should know about them. One, they are pretty cheap. Two, their quality is good. And three, production is massive. Chinese electric vehicles make up 60% of worldwide sales. 60%. Just one problem though, most of it is domestic. And there's a reason for that. The reason is Western tariffs. Donald Trump had imposed taxes on Chinese EVs when he was president. How much tax? Around 27.5%. His successor, Joe Biden, is doing the same. Reports say he will announce tariffs next week, and the tax on Chinese EVs is expected to be extended. Europe is considering the same. They are investigating Chinese EVs for unfair practices, and after this probe, tariffs could follow. Of course, China won't just accept all of it. Chances are they will retaliate. So this could snowball into a trade war, and all of it over EVs. So tonight we're looking at two major questions. One, why are Chinese EVs so cheap? And two, why do Western governments hate them? So the first question, why are they cheap? One reason is state support. China gives a lot of subsidies to EV makers, around $57 billion from 2016 to 2022. That's what the government has given, $57 billion. As a result, the country has a lot of EV brands. Guess how many? More than 200. What happens when 200 companies make the same thing? The customer has more options. And more options equals less price. But that's just one reason. Chinese companies also make their own batteries. Western firms do not. You see, China has stakes in cobalt and lithium mines around the world. They process these rare earth metals. So Chinese EV makers save money on batteries. You can also add cheap labor and weak factory rules to this mix. So put together, you have a killer product. Until now, these EVs were sold inside China. The domestic market was big. Plus, the state encouraged people to buy EVs. They gave tax cuts and subsidies. So export was not really on the agenda. But that's changing now. Chinese EV makers know that the domestic market is saturated, so they're looking abroad. This year, China will make up 25% of all EVs sold in Europe. And the US could follow. Yes, there is a 27.5% tariff, but even then, Chinese EVs are cheaper. Let me show you a comparison. The average EV price in the US is around $54,000. A really cheap one costs around $23,000. Compare this to China's BYD Seagull. It costs $10,000 in China. Now add around $5,000 for random modifications. Also add the 27.5% tariff. Even then, the Chinese car is cheaper. And this is just one example. BYD's Dolphin Mini is sold in Mexico. So right next door to the US, it costs around $21,000 there. The Nissan Leaf is quite similar to the Dolphin. Guess how much it costs in the US? Around $29,000. Xiaomi recently launched an electric vehicle. It costs around $29,000. Tesla's Model 3 is very similar to that car. But the Tesla car costs almost $39,000. So the price difference is huge. And US EV makers know this. Elon Musk admitted this on a business call in January. He said Chinese car companies are the most competitive in the world. Which brings us to the second question. Why do Western governments hate Chinese EVs? All of them have climate goals. I'm guessing they also like cheap cars. So why the tariffs? Because the auto industry is a strategic one. In the US, it employs around 9.7 million people. It also makes up around 5% of their national GDP. That's America. In Europe, the dependence is even higher. The auto industry in Europe makes up 7% of the GDP, the EU GDP. It also employs 13 million Europeans. And don't forget the symbolism. We're talking about heritage brands here like Ford, General Motors, BMW, Volkswagen. They were pioneers of the auto industry. And their domination lasted almost a century. So the pattern is quite clear. If you fall behind, you stay behind. Catching up is very hard in this industry, which is why the West is up in arms. The question is, can a trade war be avoided? China is trying to appease some Western governments, especially in Europe. China's Chery Auto is setting up a factory in Spain. BYD is building a plant in Hungary, and Leap Motor is building one in Poland. So Beijing is saying, we're not just flooding your markets, we're also giving you jobs. But the West may not buy it. EVs are projected to make up 2/3 of all vehicle sales by 2030. So we're talking about a strategic industry. Expect a brutal and ugly battle to dominate it. Now let's talk about artificial intelligence or AI. It is quickly becoming a part of our daily lives. There is a race among leading companies. Everyone is eager to integrate AI into their products. Just this week, Apple announced its big AI push. Later this year, Apple devices will come with a range of AI-based features. Here in India, the adoption of artificial intelligence is progressing at breakneck speed. Indian companies are embracing the technology, and they're doing it faster than many developed economies, like Germany and Australia. Our next report has the details.
Today's technology landscape has been defined and shaped by 4 major breakthroughs so far: the birth of the personal computer, the arrival of the internet, the launch of mobile phones, and most recently, the widespread adoption of cloud computing. Whenever these four technologies went mainstream, India took its time to embrace them. Now, a potential fifth breakthrough is upon us. It's called artificial intelligence or AI. And this time, Indian companies are swiftly getting on board. That's the claim made by this report. It says India is a world leader in AI adoption. 91% of companies have deployed AI models. And this year, they're using 50% or more of their data to train these models. This report puts India in the same club as countries like Singapore, the United States, and the United Kingdom. They are being called the AI leading countries. There's a second tier too, the AI lagging countries. It includes nations like Spain, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, and Japan. Another report from computing giant IBM shines more light on this trend. It was released in February. IBM conducted a survey. It reached out to large organizations, those with a workforce size of 1,000 or more. They were asked if they were embracing the AI trend or not. 59% of the companies responded with a yes. They are all early adopters of AI. And what are these companies using AI for? One big area is research and development, and surprisingly, this technology is also helping these employers in reskilling employees. So what's driving this widespread adoption? Easy and wide accessibility, the drive to reduce costs, and the goal to automate some of the mundane tasks. These are the major advantages of AI. The technology can address multiple pain points for businesses, so it's only a matter of time before more companies jump onto the AI bandwagon. But this rapid adoption also presents a set of unique and diverse challenges. It could make entry-level workers, especially those with lower skill levels, redundant more quickly. There are data and privacy challenges too. How do you regulate the use of personal data to train AI models? Do the users have any protections? And what kind of remedies are available in the event of any misuse? India still lacks a comprehensive data security law. Now it also needs new rules to govern the use of AI. So while corporate India races ahead on the AI rocket, the regulatory and legal framework still has some catching up to do to keep the limitations of AI in check.
We're right in the middle of India's election season, so diplomacy often takes a backseat, unless, of course, it's urgent, which is why a recent visit is making the headlines. India's Foreign Secretary travelled to Dhaka this week. He met Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, her Foreign Minister, and also the Foreign Secretary. But why now? Sheikh Hasina was re-elected back in January. Yet the first Indian visit came in the month of May, so naturally there are questions. Let's focus on the timing first. Recently, China has been making moves in Bangladesh, and three of those moves stand out. The first is a military drill. Last month, China and Bangladesh announced a joint drill. It is their first ever joint exercise. Beijing called it China-Bangladesh Golden Friendship. The two militaries will practice many operations like anti-hijacking and counter-terrorism. The second move is more debt. Reports say Dhaka will ask China for a soft loan. Now, what is a soft loan? Debt that is given to a developing country. These loans are more favorable to the borrower than the lender. And how much money are we talking about? Around $5 billion. This money will be used for two things: to buy raw materials and to support foreign exchange reserves. Apparently, Dhaka's foreign reserves are a bit low, so they're seeking China's help. And this trend will worry India. Bangladesh's debt to China has increased considerably. It was under $1 billion in 2016. It now stands at $6 billion. Today, China makes up 24% of Dhaka's foreign debt. And finally, the third move, probably the most important one, a Chinese design on the Teesta River. This river has been a flashpoint between India and Bangladesh. It is the fourth largest river in Bangladesh. It's also responsible for 14% of their crop output. Now, the Teesta flows through both countries, India and Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina wants a larger share of its water. But so far, no deal has been reached. Enter China. Dhaka is planning a project to manage and restore the river. The plan is to dredge the riverbed, repair embankments, and store water in the dry season. It's a massive undertaking. The total cost could be around $1 billion, and China is keen to do it. They've already submitted a proposal to the Bangladesh government. Even India has expressed interest, but no proposal has been submitted. If China gets this deal, India will be worried. Teesta flows very close to the Siliguri corridor. It's a narrow link between Northeast India and the rest of the country. So Chinese presence there is worrying. Now put all of this together. What picture do you get? Clearly, China is trying to gain a foothold in Dhaka. Is that why the Foreign Secretary rushed to Bangladesh? It's hard to say. Sheikh Hasina has benefited from India's neighborhood first policy. She's also fought against anti-India elements in her country. So China will find it hard to sway her. But the Teesta issue demands attention. You can't keep delaying it. Dhaka's official statement clearly mentions this issue. It says their foreign minister discussed Teesta with the Indian diplomat. But the Indian statement does not. Now, we don't know what's at play here. Maybe Dhaka is using China to pressure India. Maybe it's actually looking for Chinese partners. Whatever the reason, India must keep a close eye. Reports say New Delhi has invited Sheikh Hasina to India. She's expected to visit in June or July. Apparently, she will focus mostly on the Teesta River. I guess a leaders' meeting makes sense. It's the best way to avoid misunderstandings. Now let's turn our attention to Kashmir, the part under Pakistan's thumb, Pakistan-occupied Kashmir or POK. Of course, Islamabad doesn't call it that. Without a hint of irony, they call it Azad Kashmir. The word Azad means free. So they've named their occupied territory Free Kashmir. This is the freedom Pakistan has unleashed there. Take a look. These are the visuals coming out of POK, Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. A brutal police crackdown is underway. Reports say multiple forces are involved. The Frontier Corps, Rangers, and the Quick Response Force from Pakistan's Punjab province. They're all clashing with the people of POK. Why? Because the people of the so-called Free Kashmir dared to speak out against unjust taxation. Here's what happened. Last year, Pakistan increased electricity prices. This was because it needed money, a loan from the International Monetary Fund or the IMF. Now, this country has squandered billions over the years, mostly on its inflated military. The people of Pakistan are always second. The bloated military has always been Islamabad's priority, and it needs to feed this beast that it has created. So Pakistan keeps taking loans from the IMF. But the international lender put some conditions on the loans. It wanted Pakistan to show better money management. So what does Pakistan do? It decided to squeeze the people dry. It hiked electricity rates across the board, including in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Now, this was blatantly unfair because this region has abundant electricity supplies. It has multiple hydroelectric power plants, and the Kashmiri people were not obligated to subsidize Pakistan. Islamabad claims that POK is self-administered, so they should have had a right to refuse. They tried to exercise this right last year, and that's when the cracks appeared in the Free Kashmir narrative. Islamabad would not allow this. They had a standoff with parties in the POK. It lasted months, and finally this February, it seems to have ended. Islamabad issued a notice. It promised to work out electricity costs to provide relief to the people of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Of course, there was no follow-through. Islamabad failed to fulfill its vow. It has been stalling for months, so the people of POK got tired of waiting. They decided to launch a peaceful protest. A long march was scheduled for May 11th, a simple protest in a supposedly free region. And Pakistan did the only thing it knows how to. It opted for brute force. Yesterday, about 70 people were arrested across POK. This includes members of local political parties, student activists, and trade union leaders. They were picked up in the early hours of Thursday. These unjustified detentions sparked clashes. The Kashmiri people began to fight back. They accosted police officers, overturned vehicles. It was pure chaos. But instead of trying to calm the situation, Islamabad sent in more troops. And things got ugly. The police resorted to tear gas shelling. Some shells landed in a school. Several schoolgirls were injured. Local political parties say that 2 of these girls have died. 2 children in the so-called Free Kashmir. The people of POK have condemned the brutality. They've intensified their protests. Instead of a peaceful march on Saturday, road closures and store strikes began today. They may last a week or longer unless Islamabad resorts to its default brutal tactics. Then who knows how long the unrest might last. Eight years ago, Noland Arbo was leading a normal life. But soon that changed. He met with a diving accident. His body was paralyzed. He could not move any body part below the shoulder. Arbo had accepted his fate. But this year, his life changed once again. He played chess, not with his hands, but with his brain. Sounds like a scene out of Star Wars. But it was just plain old science. Arbo was the first human to trial Neuralink's brain chip. It's Elon Musk's neurotechnology firm. Arbo was given the chip in February. He says the surgery was easy. Since then, he's tested the chip many times. Once, he even played a video game for 8 hours with this chip. But now the technology has hit a glitch. Within a month, the implant started detaching. Its threads began to retract, and that impacted the functionality. Now, no one knows why this happened. Neuralink did not explain why, but they did put out a blog post. They said while the device did detach, scientists have since refined the implant. Basically, they're saying all is well. But is it really? Let's look at the company first. Neuralink was co-founded by Elon Musk in 2016. The goal was quite simple: build communication between the human brain and computers. Musk wanted to supercharge human capabilities. The goals were lofty to begin with: controlling devices with thoughts, treating neurological disorders, and building a relationship between humans and AI. How does it work? The technology works through an implant. It's called the link. That's the link in the Neuralink. The device is really tiny, about the size of 5 coins stacked together. A robot drills a hole in your skull. The chip is implanted in your brain. The hardware has electrodes. It records neural activity and stimulates specific regions of the brain. What happens then? Your thoughts can now control your phone. But before the power gets to your head, let's understand this. Wireless brain chips are not new. By the 2000s, monkeys were trained on it. They were doing the exact same thing, moving cursors with their brains, just like Arbo. But since then, the technology has not really evolved much. Neuralink wants to refine that, and at the core, the idea is quite impressive. This link allows you to trigger anything that is digital. It can be life-changing. You can search the internet with your brain or order food just with your thoughts. Imagine the power your thoughts would have. But as they say, with great power comes great responsibility, and we are not sure it's a word that Elon Musk understands. He wants to create a hype around Neuralink to make it seem like groundbreaking. And to be fair, the technology is incredulous, but it has its own set of problems. The first is viability. Neuralink says the chip is easy to install, it's a minor surgery, but it's not clear how this works in the long term. Until now, it's only been tested on animals. Human trials have just begun, and they've hit a hurdle in a month. Secondly, experts fear it could damage blood vessels, and that's a big challenge. Also, Musk's goal sounds less like greater good and more like dark science fiction. He says in the future, Neuralink will be able to store and replay memories, almost like the Pensy from Harry Potter. But the brain is not a hard drive. Our memories are not videos. Neural signals are emitted during the act of remembering, but those are not the memories themselves. You can't upload your consciousness. Elon Musk makes it sound easy, but neuroscientists are on the fence about this. Also, would you be okay with a big tech CEO listening to your deepest, darkest thoughts? Sounds like the start of every sci-fi horror movie. And Neuralink, by the way, is not the only player in this arena. For a change, Elon Musk is behind the curve. Other startups have made more progress and less noise, like Synchron, a company backed by Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. It has implanted its device in 10 patients. Synchron has implanted its device in 10 patients. Researchers in Switzerland have also achieved miracles. They recently helped a paralyzed man walk. So the technology is neither new nor has it been proven safe. Why then does Neuralink make so much news? You could say it's all thanks to Musk and his hype. There's a lot that pregnant women go through. Their bodies change, their hormones change, their lives change. Most of it is acknowledged, discussed, even addressed. But one thing is often left out: their mental health. Globally, 10% of pregnant women experience depression. The number is higher after giving birth. In some cases, it even leads to suicide, mostly because there's no timely intervention. New mothers are taken care of physically, but no one is really looking at their mental health. Guess who wants to change that? Nepal. Their government wants to screen pregnant mothers for mental disorders. If they have problems, they will be given help. Our next report tells you why Nepal's move is commendable.
Nepal's health ministry has a new plan. It wants to screen pregnant mothers. What for? To assess their mental health. The screening will be done from the first semester. It will continue even after birth. If the women suffer from mental health problems, they will be offered prompt treatment. So why is Kathmandu doing this? It's because mental health is emerging as a leading cause of maternal deaths. Look at the numbers. In 1996, Nepal had around 539 maternal deaths per 100,000 births. The Himalayan nation worked hard to bring this number down. In 2016, it was 239 per 100,000 births. But they soon encountered a new hurdle. Every year, hundreds of women succumb to death during or after their pregnancies. It's because of many reasons, including excessive bleeding, pregnancy-related high blood pressure disorders. All of these are preventable, but they found another cause too: intentional self-harm. So Nepal wants to prevent that. They believe timely intervention will help, which is why they want to screen mothers. That way, they can be offered help, and it is not a problem just in Nepal. This happens across the globe. About 10% of pregnant women experience a mental disorder. The number rises after giving birth. 13% of women who have just given birth suffer from depression. It's called postpartum depression. In developing countries, the number is higher. It's 15.6% during pregnancy and 19.8% after childbirth. This affects how the mother functions. She may fail to adequately eat, bathe, or care for herself. As a result, the infant too is affected. In some severe cases, the mother can even die by suicide. Now, this is easily treatable. All it needs is effective intervention. And that's what many countries lack. There are multiple physical tests that an expectant mother undergoes, but no one is checking on her mental well-being. By integrating mental health intervention into general postnatal care, Nepal is trying to change that. And for that, it needs to be lauded.
Our next story is from Africa. It's about the entire continent, the youngest and fastest growing continent in the world. About 40% of the people in Africa are under 15 years old, and that is where the future is, the future workforce and the future market. At least one American company has realized this, and it's readying itself for an African future. I'm talking about the global streaming giant Netflix. Netflix is prepared to bet big on Africa, both as a market and as a source of content. The company is expanding its lineup of African content. This means more African stories, both for people from the continent and for the rest of the world. Netflix already has some successful properties, like South Africa's Blood and Water. The show has been on air for years, and it has consistently given returns, even reaching the #1 spot in the US at one point. Another South African success was Heart of the Hunter. The Nigerian film The Black Book was another hit. It was made with a budget of just $1 million, and it became a hit around the globe. The Black Book even topped charts in South Korea and several Latin American nations. Now, Netflix, we know, has global reach. It needs content that can appeal to people around the world. And Africa is proving to be a rich vein of that content. A Netflix official, the company's vice president of content for Africa, was in Botswana this week. He was there for a summit. He said, and I quote, "African people deserve to see themselves, their lives, their cultures, their languages, and their countries reflected on the screen." That seems to be what Netflix is aiming for. But it's not all about representation. Netflix is a company at the end of the day, and the only thing that matters is the bottom line. As I mentioned, they've seen success with their African programming. They've seen African content top charts around the world. That's proven success, and that is why they're expanding their footprint. In 2016, Netflix invested $175 million on productions in Africa, the whole continent, $175 million. For 2022-23, it had earmarked $63 million for South Africa alone. And last year, it announced even bigger investments in the continent. So it's definitely betting big. But will this be enough to win the streaming race? The money and the local content. After all, it's not a revolutionary idea. Netflix is not the only company to have realized Africa's potential. Others have tried, and it's been a mixed bag. Like Netflix's global rival Amazon Video. They're pulling out of Africa, cutting their funding. The African market proved to be daunting for a number of reasons. From patchy internet connections to subscription plans that are too expensive for some local markets. And the biggest hurdle for global companies is the local competition. In Africa, that means Showmax. Showmax is an African company based in South Africa. We've spoken about it before on this show. Showmax is relatively new, but its parent company has been in the television business for years, all across the African continent. So Showmax understands the audience better than Netflix or Amazon or any other American company. And the African firm has used this knowledge to pull ahead. A few months ago, Showmax overtook Netflix in America. They were neck and neck for a while, then they pulled ahead, and they're challenging Netflix openly now, fighting for the rights of local content and butting heads in key markets. Things look ripe for a showdown. So who will win? The American giant with deep pockets or the local African firm with an eye for content? We'll know for sure in the months to come. And now let's turn our attention to the east, to Japan. When you think of Japan, what is it that comes to mind? The image of a high-tech country, perhaps, sleek bullet trains and cute robots. Japan has built a reputation for itself as a futuristic, pristine country. So sometimes it is shocking to hear some headlines, like the one that is doing the rounds today. A bread company has ordered a mass recall. They've recalled over 100,000 packets of bread. Why? Because 2 of them contained a nasty surprise, a rat found in bread packets. Japan has been in damage control ever since. Here's our report.
Japan. The East Asian nation is famous for a lot of things. Cherry blossoms, matcha tea, the samurai. There are a lot of things people identify with Japan. But in recent years, one thing has stood out. Cleanliness. The people of Japan impress the world during major events, like football World Cups or concerts. Japanese fans were seen cleaning up after the events ended. They made sure to pick up their own mess and left the stadiums and arenas spotless. This charmed the world. But maybe it also created some unrealistic expectations about Japan being some infallible, hyper-clean nation. That explains the shock and horror around the world today. Headline after headline is talking about the same thing: Japan's rat bread. It happened on Tuesday with one of the country's most famous bread brands, Pasco. Pasco bread is found all over Japan and abroad. It's exported around the world. So Pasco has built a reputation. But that reputation took a hit on Tuesday because 2 packets were contaminated with rat remains. We don't know the details. Most people might not want to know them anyway. But what we do understand is that a rat got into a Pasco factory, a bread factory in Japan's capital, Tokyo. The rodent wound up on the assembly line, and the precise Japanese machines did the rest. The rat was found the next morning in 2 separate packets of bread. On Tuesday itself, PASCO issued a statement. They said, "We would like to apologize deeply for causing trouble to our customers and clients. We will strengthen our quality management system to ensure there won't be a recurrence." It didn't end there. The company also issued a recall. 104,000 packets are being recalled. Anyone who bought them will get a refund. Now, for any other country, that would be it. People would move on. But Japan is different. They take hygiene very seriously. Food contaminations and recalls make headlines because they are so rare. And there are always consequences. Take this incident from last August. It involved rice balls. 2 rice balls sold at a 7-Eleven were contaminated with cockroaches. The uproar was similar. The store recalled about 2,000 rice balls. Apologies were issued. But the stock market, at least, was not forgiving. The company that made the rice balls saw its share prices fall by over 4%. Even the distributor, 7-Eleven, wasn't spared. Their shares tanked by over 1%. These numbers may seem small until you compare them to Japan's economic growth. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic, Japan's economy declined by 4.15%, and that was devastating. So, a 4% drop in Japan is brutal. Now, the bread company, PASCO, may be looking at a similar plunge. It may even be worse, because this is a household name, an export good. Japan takes that seriously. So, it may take PASCO a long time to recover from this rat bread fiasco.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Russia, a bus drives off a bridge into a river, killing 3 people and injuring several others. In Jordan, divers explore the country's underwater military museum, and thousands of drones illuminate the skies in South Korea. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1994, Nelson Mandela was sworn in as the president of South Africa. Mandela dedicated his life to the fight against apartheid. He spent 27 years in prison. He was the first black man to lead the country. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.
Ourselves to discover an African solution under God. You can see that the president-elect is certainly enjoying himself today, getting into the spirit of things and relating to old friends.
Die beste van Ietenboer, namens Suid-Afrika.
Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. South Africa goes to the polls on the 29th of May. I will track the election and bring you ground reports. Is it the end of the road for the African National Congress? And will former President Jacob Zuma stage a dramatic comeback? From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost.